Joining me from Canberra a short time ago is Tom Connell, Sky News political reporter and host. Tom, thank you so much for your time. Did the Prime Minister get what he wanted from the Premiers today?
I think he did. Again, we haven't had any, infighting, if you like, within National Cabinet. Yes, there are some different views afterwards. And look, it was interesting to note that Scott Morrison was very keen to say during the press conference, this won't be a one-size-fits-all approach. And we saw that soon afterwards with what the Premiers had to say. And they're going at very different paces. Victoria, I know where you are, you'll be marching in the streets for freedom maybe in a couple of weeks. Whereas in the Northern Territory, they don't know that anything's happened with this COVID-19 business in the past few weeks, but they've all signed on to the broad approach. Again, no one's talking out about anything breaking down, and I think that right now continues to be the test for National Cabinet. Now, the next test is, can the economy be opened up, and is that going to happen in a good enough way? And you can talk about schools as well, but it's no small feat still, given how COAD has worked in the past few years, Andrew, that this whole process is still working pretty well.
Well, I don't know, given that the tests take only 2 days for the results to come back, Daniel Andrews actually has the results of most of the tests over the past week, so I don't know really what he's waiting for. You mentioned schools, Tom. The Prime Minister's been very keen to reopen them, says keeping them closed costs 300,000 jobs. But what did he get out of the states today on that front?
No actual progress. Look, I thought the most interesting line from Scott Morrison asked about this, where do schools fit in? He said, well, we're already there. We're at the stage where the advice is you can open schools. Apart from a couple of incendiary comments and the most noteworthy one from Dan Tehan, the government's been keen not to necessarily attack Victoria, largely seen as the laggard state on schools so far, but at the same time stress they believe this can be done safely. Now, they're saying the official advice from Victoria around from the Chief Health Officer saying the best way to stop the spread is for term 2 online, not face-to-face, apart from obviously where that's required for essential workers and people with children that need to go into school that have no other option, that it's not about the safety of the children. They're saying, Victoria is saying it's going to stop the spread. Now that to me says the only real excuse is making sure you have things such as staff rooms sorted out. Other than then, you should be moving on this. So I think from here the pressure will build, barring some sort of big schools outbreak in other states. They're already starting to open up, and those dates are over the next couple of weeks. Now, if we're still in a situation in Victoria where they're saying no face-to-face learning for most of the population until term 3, I think pressure will build because you'll have not only parents doing homeschooling and not enjoying it all that much, maybe some of them are, Andrew, I don't want to cast aspersions on those lessons that are going very well, but for the others and wanting to get back to work, which you mentioned, well, they'll be saying, come on, we're ready.
Yes, and if it didn't come at a terrible cost to the students, because this at-home learning is not as effective, and for disadvantaged students, it's terrible. I just don't know what the hell's going on in Victoria. Any sign from the Prime Minister today on when we'll be allowed, say, to travel overseas?
Not for a long time. In fact, the interesting thing, the final phase of this is still not travelling overseas. So 1, 2, 3, opening up the economy. Phase 3 would allow interstate travel freely, New Zealand travel, and yes, it counts as overseas, but we've spoken about the Trans-Tasman bubble before, but nothing else. The interesting thing about this, though, Andrew, is whether or not international students might be able to come here. It might surprise people, and it would come with more detail. You'd obviously need quarantine. You'd need universities set up to do this. You'd need some strong monitoring because you're talking about tens of thousands of people, and also them going into clusters around places in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, and so on. But there was a possibility of that happening down the track. The detail's not fleshed out because that's not locked in. The big one I'm sure a lot of people want to know about just quickly as well, Andrew, pubs, apparently not for a while. Now, this is stage 3. It doesn't mean you can't go into a pub until then. If you've got a pub with a significant part where it's also a restaurant, that can be classified as a restaurant and you'll be able to eat in and have a beer as well. So the point is they're not opening up bars or, bar sections of pubs where people are, I suppose, often congregating close together and getting closer as the night flows on and the drinks flow as well, Andrew. But they're not going to open up those sections. They will allow people in. The curious part is it's only 10 patrons, and so far it doesn't matter how big it is. So you can have some massive venues that apparently will only allow 10 patrons, and then small ones will be allowed 10 as well. Now, whether that changes down the track and it's a 4 square metre rule, that would seem to make more sense, we'll see. Perhaps it's just a very early loosening of restrictions, and maybe there'll be more people in phase 2 in a few weeks. But that was one thing that a couple of operators that I've spoken to said seemed a bit curious.
Yes, well, I think it's highly curious, and I'm about to explore just how curious that is in a second. But, I also think it's curious that they're talking about letting foreign students come in under what maybe quarantine, but we can't leave. I don't know how sustainable that is as an argument for much longer. Tom Connell, thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.